Te encuentras en Siniestros, Relatos. Este lugar sombrío y tétrico alberga historias tan espeluznantes que harán que tu respiración se entrecorte y tu corazón palpite desesperadamente. Aquí, en la profundidad de la noche, los relatos cobran vida propia, revelando pesadillas que ningún ser humano debería enfrentar jamás. El horror aguarda pacientemente, escondido en cada palabra pronunciada, esperando para atraparte desprevenido y arrastrarte hacia el abismo de la desesperación más profunda. Escucha con atención si te atreves. The percussive violence from downstairs, a sharp, splintering crack, followed by the unmistakable chime of shattering glass, sliced through the quiet hum of the suburban night. In that instant, the illusion of a mundane babysitting job disintegrated. The Ashworths, Elias and Miriam, purveyors of effortless suburban grace when they'd hired me, dissolved into unsettling unknowns as I found myself burrowed in suffocating darkness, the small trembling bodies of their children pressed against me. It had promised simplicity this evening. Newcomers to the winding lanes of the neighborhood, the Ashworths needed someone to watch Nora and Leo while they attended some corporate affair. College savings beckoned, so I'd readily agreed. They were the picture of curated success. Elias, perpetually encased in the armor of expensive tailoring. Miriam, possessing the serene poise cultivated in studios smelling of sandalwood, and at luncheons discussing philanthropy. Even the children, Nora and Leo, were exquisitely rendered miniatures, shy but sweet. 7 o'clock arrival, the standard tour of domestic routines, emergency contacts recited like liturgy. Miriam Ashworth seemed strung tighter than usual, a faint tremor in her manicured hands I'd dismissed as first-time sitter anxieties. Under no circumstances open the door, Clara, or answer the landline, Elias Ashworth instructed, his gaze locking onto mine with an unnerving focus just before they departed. An odd intensity simmered there, but I offered a practiced smile, assuring him of absolute compliance. The initial hours unfolded predictably. Card games with Nora and Leo, macaroni shaped like stars, the ritualistic tucking into beds beneath duvets printed with spaceships and fairies. 9 o'clock ticked past. I just sunk into the plush embrace of the living room sofa, the television casting flickering blue light, when the sound erupted from below. That violent cacophony. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Intruder? Police? Before coherent thought could fully form, heavy footfalls began their ascent on the staircase. Instinct propelled me. I bolted towards the children's rooms. Nora was already sitting bolt upright, her eyes vast pools of moonlit fear. What was that? Her whisper was barely audible. "Shh, sweet girl, I don't know," I murmured, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "We have to be silent like mice. Can you do that?" She nodded, clutching a worn velvet owl. I lifted her small weight, hurrying to Leo's room. He slept on, blessedly unaware. A pang of envy struck me, swiftly replaced by urgency. Gently shaking him awake, I pressed a finger to my lips. He blinked, confused but thankfully silent. A good boy. The steps drew nearer, deliberate, heavy on the landing. My mind raced, seeking sanctuary. The master bedroom's walk-in closet, dark, deep. I herded the children inside, pulling the door almost shut. We huddled, 3 small mammals frozen in the sudden grip of predation, the air thick with our mingled, shallow breaths and the frantic drumming in my own chest. Through the narrow aperture, I watched a slice of the bedroom beyond. A silhouette stretched, distorted, sliding across the far wall. I stopped breathing altogether. "Little birds flown the coop?" A rough voice grated, devoid of warmth, laced with menace. Not Elias, not Miriam, a stranger, angry. Nora emitted a tiny choked sob. I tightened my hold, praying it wouldn't be repeated. Beside me, Leo vibrated with silent terror, his eyes fixed on the sliver of light. He was in the bedroom now. Sounds of drawers being yanked open, objects carelessly tossed aside, punctuated by guttural muttering. "Where is it? Said it'd be right here." My thoughts spun wildly. Who was he? What it? Why this house? Then, the jarring ring of a mobile phone. The intruder swore, then answered. "Yeah? Nah, nothing. Place is clean. What? Check the kids' rooms? Supposed to be empty tonight." A glacial chill permeated my veins. How did he know about the children's rooms? Why did he expect emptiness? The call ended abruptly. The heavy tread turned, moving directly towards our hiding place. My arms became vises around Nora and Leo. This was it. Discovery felt inevitable. But then, another sound pierced the tension. Faint at first, rapidly swelling. Sirens. Wailing, urgent, painting the night outside in frantic strokes of sound. The intruder unleashed a stream of curses. His footsteps pounded away from us down the stairs, a frantic retreat. I waited, counting heartbeats that felt like hours, 60 agonizing seconds, before daring to shift. "Stay right here," I whispered, my voice raspy. "I need to see." Creeping from the closet's cloying darkness, I peered through the bedroom window. Flashing red and blue lights bathed the manicured lawn and the quiet street. Police cruisers angled towards the house. The front door gaped open like a wound, but the intruder was gone. My hand, trembling violently, fumbled for the bedside phone, dialing 911. "Break-in," I managed, the words catching in my throat. "The babysitter, 2 children, upstairs. I think he left, but..." The dispatcher's calm voice assured me officers were already sweeping the premises. Help was ascending. Moments later, a uniformed figure filled the doorway, weapon lowered but ready. "Police, it's all right," he said, his tone measured, gentle. "You're safe. Come out slowly now." I coaxed the children from the closet, and we were guided downstairs through a landscape of domestic chaos. Furniture lay wounded, portraits hung askew. My only focus was the solid reality of safety. While one officer patiently took my fragmented statement, another approached, his expression etched with gravity. "We have some questions about the Ashworths," he began. A lead weight settled in my stomach. "Are they okay?" He let out a slow breath. "Ma'am, the people you know as the Ashworths, their real names are Elias and Miriam Thorne. They're fugitives. wanted across 3 states for large-scale embezzlement, fraud. The floor seemed to tilt. But the children? The children are unharmed, he confirmed, his gaze softening slightly. But they aren't the Thorns' children, Clara. They were abducted 6 months ago, from Ohio. The room swam. I collapsed onto the edge of an overturned ottoman, the world rearranging itself into a horrifying new configuration. The impeccable family, the serene facade, all an elaborate, monstrous lie. And those poor, sweet children. Hours unfolded, dripping revelations. The Thorns, masters of deceit, had orchestrated intricate financial scams, vanishing with millions, always staying just beyond the law's reach. The children, Nora and Leo, no, Sophie and Ben, were part of their camouflage, props to project an image of stable normalcy. The man in the house? Likely an associate or perhaps a victim, seeking retribution or evidence, never anticipating occupants. The Thorns' insistence on my isolation suddenly made chilling sense. They'd suspected someone might come calling. The following day witnessed the reunion. Sophie and Ben returned to the arms of their true parents. The raw, unbridled relief, the tear-streaked joy, that image is seared into my memory. Afterwards, whispers labeled me a hero. I felt anything but. Naivete clung to me like a shroud, foolish, trusting. My heart ached for Sophie and Ben, their small worlds fractured not once, but twice. That night irrevocably altered my internal landscape. Caution became my default setting, observation a constant hum beneath the surface. I learned the treacherous nature of appearances, how normalcy could cloak profound danger. Yet I also discovered a reservoir of strength within myself. In the crucible of fear, I hadn't shattered. I had shielded those children. I had confronted terror and endured. Years have passed. Sometimes the memory surfaces, sharp and sudden. I wonder about Sophie and Ben, hoping fiercely they found healing within their reclaimed family. I picture the Thorns, confined by steel and concrete, and question if remorse ever pierces their calculated self-interest. Mostly I reflect on the terrifying speed with which the ordinary can curdle into the extraordinary, the secrets that fester behind meticulously maintained facades. I still take babysitting jobs, occasionally, but now, intuition is my guide. A flicker of unease, a discordant note, I heed them. The truest peril, I learned with chilling finality, isn't always the monster breaking down the door, but the ones who smiled and invited you inside. That night taught me bravery isn't the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it. It's the fierce instinct to protect the vulnerable. And sometimes it's about walking through darkness and finding yourself, unexpectedly, stronger on the other side. The naive girl who entered the Ashworth house vanished that night, replaced by someone wiser, warier, yet undeniably more resilient. A brutal lesson, perhaps, but indelible. A crumpled shape in the gully. That's what forced my foot onto the brake 6 months back. Illusory, I know now, not flesh and bone. Yet the phantom persists, a nightly sentinel rooted to that precise patch of earth, right arm extended, thumb aimed down the asphalt ribbon, away from Crow's Bend. My nights belong to Apex Health Logistics, 10-hour stretches piloting a van laden with medical necessities across the shadowed landscapes of 3 counties, servicing nursing homes, hospice wings. The wages suffice, the solitude I welcome. Since Clara's departure, Leo's absence carving a hollow echo in our home, the quiet there became suffocating. Out here, under the moon, silence feels less like loss, more like landscape. Harrow Road claims me nightly, sometime between the 2nd and 3rd hour post-midnight. 20 miles of blacktop cleaving through whispering corn and stands of skeletal woods. No sodium lamps bleed orange here. No porch lights gleam. Only darkness reigns, punctuated by the fleeting glint of reflectors that betray the treacherous bends. Crow's Bend is the nada, a vicious hairpin clinging to an ancient gnarled oak, the tarmac plunging a sheer 8 feet into a hungry drainage channel. The inaugural night, my headlamps snagged on a dark sprawl, halfway submerged in the gully's muck. Brakes screamed. Boxes of sterile tubing avalanched in the cargo bay. It had the posture of a man, face planted in the mire, clad in black, one arm bent obscenely. Flashlight gripped, phone poised for the emergency call I mentally rehearsed, I crunched towards the ditch edge. Emptiness greeted me. No form, no disturbance in the mud beyond the usual scatter of dead leaves and discarded cans. 5 minutes I stood, carving the dark with my torch beam. Then peripheral flicker, something pale, shifting. I pivoted. 50 feet distant, silhouetted against the bend, stood a towering shape. Right arm rigidly outstretched, thumb depressed. My shouted greeting dissolved unanswered. 3 steps I ventured. The apparition dissolved into the night air. Fatigue, I reasoned. Delirium born of double shifts, scraped together for Leo's birthday fund. Yet the following night, same hour, same treacherous curve, it materialized anew. Motionless, arm extended, thumb down. This time the accelerator met the floor. For 7 consecutive nights, it held its vigil, a constant fixture in that desolate place. Sometimes caught blooming in the headlight wash, other times a fleeting specter shrinking in the rear view. Once, a terrifying instant, I perceived it sprinting alongside, matching my 45 miles per hour. But a second glance revealed only vacant roadside. I rerouted, adding 40 minutes of winding back roads to my nocturnal pilgrimage. 2 weeks of this detour earned a summons from management. Deliveries lagged, clients complained. Reluctantly, I returned to Harrow Road and to the waiting presence at Crow's Bend. Curiosity gnawed. At the Greasy Spoon near Harrow Road, truckers spun yarns between coffee refills. Tales surfaced. A university girl vanished without trace in '87. Her sedan discovered roadside near the bend, keys dangling. A local biker, 93, whose machine met the oak, they recovered only his shattered helmet, never the rider. A minivan, a 06, swallowed by the flooded ditch. Mother and children found days later, belted in their submerged tomb, the father unaccounted for. I meticulously logged these fragments, cross-referencing dates with weather charts, lunar cycles, temperature logs. Rain or shine, new moon or full, stifling heat or biting frost. The apparition remained indifferent. Only the temporal window held firm, always between 2 and 3 a.m. Technology became my next recourse. A dashcam yielded only footage of empty tarmac scrolling into darkness. An infrared lens detected anomalous cold patches precisely where the figure stood, yet rendered no discernible form. Motion-triggered trail cameras, secreted along the curve, amassed a nocturnal gallery. Startled deer, masked raccoons, even a bewildered coyote squinting into the flash. But of the spectral watcher, not a single frame. Last week, resolve hardened. Enough shadows, enough evasion. I would confront this phantom, touch it if necessary, anchor my sanity. Arriving early, I parked the van at Crow's Bend, 1:45, silencing the engine but leaving the headlamps to pierce the gathering mist rolling off the fields. The dashboard clock ticked with agonizing slowness. 2:17. A flicker in the side mirror. It stood nearer than ever before, details sharpened. Not a coat, but a long dark dress, hem ragged, smeared with mud. The extended right arm, not merely outstretched, but wrenched backward at an angle defying anatomy. And the thumb, not gesturing down the road, but grotesquely hyperextended, aiming directly into the murky depths of the ditch. Slowly I exited the van, eyes locked on the form. The air plunged, instantly frigid, my exhalations plumed white. The figure remained inert, seemingly breathless, its face obscured by shadow. 10 feet separated us. Close enough now to see the dress wasn't merely muddy, but sodden, shedding droplets that evaporated before striking the asphalt. 8 feet. The fog coiled around my ankles like chill tendrils. 6 feet. Its head jerked, a spasmodic, puppet-like twitch. 4 feet. The reek of stagnant water and decaying leaves filled my nostrils. I halted, hand tentatively rising, mouth forming unspoken words. Its head snapped upright. Beneath the cowl, where features should have resided, only black, viscous water churned and spilled. The hideously twisted arm lashed out, seizing my wrist. The contact shocked, like immersion in glacial meltwater. Its thumb ground into my palm. Not flesh, but something unyielding, smooth, small, metallic. Revulsion propelled me backward. I scrambled into the van, tires spitting gravel, pushing the engine until the sanctuary lights of the truck stop bloomed ahead. In the trembling quiet of the parking lot, I dared to uncurl my fingers. Embedded deep in my palm, leaving a sharp indentation, lay a small brass key. The distinctive cut of its teeth resonated. The key from the missing student's abandoned sedan, the one never found. The following night found me back at Crow's Bend. It stood waiting, posture unchanged. But dread had yielded to understanding. I parked, walked to the precipice of the gully. The mist arrived, punctual as ever. The chill descended. I produced the brass key, holding it aloft. Instantly, the figure materialized at my side. Its featureless, water-sluicing cowl angled towards the ditch bottom. The distorted arm pointed emphatically downwards. My gaze traced the trajectory of that broken thumb, settling on a faint metallic gleam obscured by slime and sediment. I descended, boots sinking into the cold mire. Near the gully floor, half swallowed by decades of accumulated silt, lay the corroded shell of a vehicle, the unmistakable lines of an early 80s Honda. With unnerving ease, the key turned in the trunk lock, as if completing a long interrupted circuit. Within, swaddled in brittle plastic, resided a sheaf of letters. Intimate correspondence. Dozens. Addressed to the vanished student, penned by her married university professor, detailing with chilling clarity his plan to stage her demise as a roadside tragedy, to watch her car plunge, ensuring no one would ever unearth the truth. But someone had known. Someone had kept vigil. I made the call. The authorities unearthed more than just incriminating letters from that waterlogged trunk. They found corroborating evidence, the final pieces of a puzzle unsolved for 37 years, delivering long-delayed closure to a grieving family. Harrow Road remains my nightly passage. Crow's Bend, a familiar landmark. The sentinel is gone. The arm that indicated the path, the thumb that guided my descent, the face of churning dark water that waited with such profound patience, vanished. Yet occasionally, when fog swathes the landscape and the air bites cold, my rearview mirror captures a fleeting impression, a shape by the roadside, an arm lifted not in supplication, but in silent acknowledgement. Gratitude. I drive on without pause now. The quiet along this stretch has transformed. No longer the oppressive weight of my empty house, nor the simple neutrality of the night shift. It resonates with peace, the tranquility of a protracted wait concluded, a story finally brought to light. The brass key rests in my drawer. Not for its function. The police catalogued the letters, the car, everything, but as a tangible reminder, perception is fallible. What first appears as roadside detritus might be a summons, a perceived vagrant, a silent witness, a chilling legend, a narrative demanding justice. The professor awaits trial next month. Investigators uncovered further damning secrets hidden within his respectable life. Secrets he believed drowned forever in the mire of Crow's Bend. My statement is official record, omitting only the spectral encounter, the water visage, the glacial touch, the key pressed into my hand. Certain truths resist explanation to those who haven't navigated that particular darkness between 2 and 3 a.m. Clara phoned last week. News travels. The delivery driver who stumbled upon a cold case solution, who inadvertently brought a killer towards reckoning, who offered solace to a family suspended in unknowing for nearly 4 decades. Leo had asked about me, she said. Perhaps a visit. Yes, I replied. That would be good. I have stories now, I told her. Not of phantoms or fog-bound apparitions. True stories about patience, about observation, about the unexpected grace found in stopping for someone in need, even when comprehension lags behind instinct. The night shift still claims me. Apex Health Logistics, my vessel through the dark. Harrow Road still unspools before me. Crow's Bend, a passage marked by memory rather than dread. My gaze stays fixed forward now, not glancing back. Whatever lingered there for 37 years has found its release, its justice served. Fellow drivers sometimes probe, whispering of the bend, the legends, the figure they insist they've glimpsed, arm extended. I offer only caution. Drive alertly, watch the road. Trust that initial impressions often deceive. And should their headlights ever illuminate something unexpected, something waiting in the mist with an outstretched limb, perhaps my experience will surface. Perhaps they'll recall that true terror sometimes isn't the specter in the shadows, but the darkness concealed within the mundane light, patiently awaiting discovery, needing only someone to pause to look deeper, to extend a hand. The watcher of Crow's Bend is at peace, but innumerable roads curve through the night. Countless bends harbor untold stories. Other sentinels stand waiting in the gloom. They require only one thing: a driver willing to stop. A whisper of metal met the low-pile carpet. A sound faint, yet jarring enough to sever the thread of the email I was composing in my cramped home office. It jolted me, that small clatter, because the surface of my desk, a stark plane holding only my laptop, offered nothing that could have obeyed gravity just then. This room, little more than a box, contained only the desk, my chair, the humming tower of my computer, and a steel filing cabinet pressed stoically against the far wall. To my right, a single window offered a slice of the mundane street outside. I twisted in my chair. There, nestled against the caster wheel, lay the keys. My heart gave a single concussive thud against my ribs. Instant recognition. These were the keys I'd mourned, the ones swallowed by the chaos of a party in a different city 2 weeks prior. Keys I'd long since consigned to the realm of the irrevocably lost. Their sudden, impossible manifestation on my office floor sent a cold clench through my gut. Rising slowly, I bent, my fingers closing around the familiar shape. They felt unnaturally cool, the serrated edges biting faintly into my palm. The memory surfaced. Liam's birthday crammed into his city apartment. Late hour, too many people vibrating in too small a space, a maelstrom of laughter and overlapping conversations. I'd nursed a couple of beers, nothing more, yet remained lucid, acutely aware of the trinity I guarded: wallet, phone, keys. Then the sudden void in my pocket, the frantic pat-down, the burrowing through sofa cushions, the sweep under furniture, the inquiries drowned out by the party's din. Seen a set of car keys, little leather fob. Blank faces, sympathetic shrugs. Anxiety sharp and metallic had risen in my throat. Home was an hour's drive away. Liam, bless him, offered his couch. The next day involved a locksmith, a violated door frame, and a filed police report. A formality for keys presumed gone forever. A week passed, the incident receding, smoothed over by resignation. And now, here they were, in my hand. A faint, insistent pulse began to tap at my temples as my mind scrambled for logic. My phone screen glowed, 3:07 p.m. My gaze swept the small office again. Nothing disturbed. The window latch was secure. The door to the hallway stood ajar, as always. I placed the keys on the desk, their presence an accusation against reason, and drew 2 deliberate, slow breaths. A tremor played in my fingertips. The impulse to call Liam flickered, then died. How would that even sound? "Hey, remember those keys I lost at your place? They just materialized on my floor." Absurdity silenced me. That evening, the familiar ritual of solitary dinner preparation. In the kitchen, under the glare of the overhead light, I was stirring pasta when the bulb gave a sudden, violent flicker. A blink, an electrical hiccup. Old house, I reasoned. Faulty wiring. It spasmed again, more insistently this time, before resuming its steady glow. I dismissed it. But later, seated at the small table, spoon halfway to my mouth, a prickle crawled up the nape of my neck. The distinct, unnerving sensation of being observed. My eyes darted to the empty kitchen doorway, once, twice. Nothing but shadow and the passage to the hall. Still the unease remained, a knot tightening in my stomach, leaching the flavor from my meal. Later still, retrieving a book from my bedroom, a floorboard groaned in the hallway outside. My house sighed and settled often, timbers contracting with the cool night air. But this sound was different. It had weight, intention, a deliberate footfall on a known weak spot. I froze, listening, mouth instantly dry, pulse leaping. Silence stretched, thick and watchful. Holding my breath, I reached out, flipped the hallway light switch. The corridor sprang into view, stark and empty. I checked the front door, bolted, chained. A quick, tense tour through the living room, the unused guest room. All appeared undisturbed. Just jumpy, I told myself, rattled by the inexplicable keys. The following day found me sprawled on the living room sofa, television murmuring, though my thoughts kept snagging on the keys. I'd deposited them in the small ceramic dish by the front door, my usual repository for loose change and forgotten things. Then, cutting through the show's dialogue, came a faint, rhythmic clicking from the direction of the hall, like metal gently tapping against wood. I muted the volume, head cocked, straining to hear. The clicking ceased. Rising, I padded into the hallway. The ceramic dish was still there. The keys were not. I found them several feet away, near the baseboard where the wall met the floor. As if they'd fallen? But the trajectory was wrong. Too far, requiring a slide or a toss, not a simple tumble. I stooped, retrieved them. That same chill emanated from the metal. I tried to rationalize, to shrug it off, but a familiar tightness constricted my chest. The unease was back, sharper this time. A new ritual began. Locks checked not once, but twice, thrice before bed. The living room lamp was now left burning through the night, a small beacon against the encroaching shadows. Damn the electric bill. Sleep became fractured. I'd jolt awake in the deep hours, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., heart hammering, convinced I'd heard the whisper of footsteps on the carpet. Sweat slicked my skin. House settling, I'd chant silently, pipes groaning. Sometimes propelled by sheer dread, I'd fling back the covers, switch on every light down the hall, and stand there, straining my ears in the artificial glare, finding only emptiness and the frantic thrum of my own blood. The certainty, however, persisted. I was not alone. Days later, back in the office, wrestling with neglected work emails. The overhead light stuttered, once, twice, died completely for a full second, then flared back to life. My monitor, however, remained steadfastly illuminated. Not a power surge, then. Something localized, targeted, like playful fingers on a hidden switch. I rubbed my temples, forcing focus back onto the screen, and then, directly behind me, a sound. Indisputable. The soft, swift scuff of a shoe shifting weight. I launched myself out of the chair, sending it skittering backward on its wheels. I whirled around. Nothing. Empty space stared back. My gaze locked onto the spot where the sound had originated, breath catching in my throat, waiting for any flicker of movement. My lungs felt tight. I forced a deep, ragged inhale, then another. My entire body was strung taut, fingers visibly trembling. An overwhelming urge to flee surged through me. Jacket snatched, keys forgotten, I bolted from the house. I drove aimlessly, circuits around the familiar blocks, the motion a balm to my frayed nerves. Eventually, I pulled into the glaringly bright lot of a 24-hour coffee shop. I sat nursing a lukewarm brew I didn't want, caffeine jangling against the adrenaline already flooding my system. My thoughts raced, colliding. An intruder? Someone playing cruel games? Or had I unwittingly carried something back from Liam's party? Something intangible, unwelcome. The timeline mocked me. Keys vanished in another city, reappeared here 2 weeks later, untouched by any known hand. And since their return, this cascade of unsettling phenomena. Lights behaving erratically, phantom noises, the persistent, chilling sensation of being watched. Returning home near 7, the porch light casting long shadows, felt like breaching enemy territory. I stepped inside, pausing in the entryway. The air felt discernibly colder, a chill that had nothing to do with the evening temperature. I checked the thermostat, set as usual. Nudging it higher offered little comfort. Then I saw them, the keys, resting on the narrow console table beneath the hallway mirror. I knew with absolute certainty I had left them in the ceramic dish before my panicked flight. Tentatively, I picked them up. The weight was familiar, solid, but tracing the worn leather fob, my fingertips snagged on a fresh scratch, thin and white against the dark surface. A detail I'd never noticed before. Rough to the touch. I returned them deliberately to the dish and retreated to the kitchen, seeking the normalcy of preparing a meal. The gnawing unease a constant, unwelcome companion. The subsequent week saw an escalation. Light switches became temperamental, bulbs flickering in protest until toggled off and on again. Lying in bed, drifting on the edge of sleep, I'd hear them. Distinct, measured footsteps crossing the living room floor. Slow, deliberate pacing. Each time I'd sit bolt upright, adrenaline scorching through me, listening until the silence itself seemed to ring. The ensuing search, frantic, heart-pounding, always yielded the same result. Empty rooms, undisturbed furniture, shadows clinging to corners. My eyes scanned frantically, seeking a human shape, finding only my own reflection in darkened windows. I tried recording the sounds once, my phone held aloft in the trembling dark. Playback revealed only ambient static and the ragged cadence of my own breathing. Defeated, I called an electrician. He arrived, amiable and efficient, checked the breaker box, tested outlets, replaced a couple of aging switches. His verdict, everything shipshape. Minor quirks, perhaps, but nothing to explain footsteps or targeted flickering. He chuckled, suggesting raccoons in the attic, a feature my modest house lacked. That evening, the lights seemed to mock his assessment, their flickering more pronounced, almost insolent. Sleep became a besieged territory. I'd wake gasping, phantom breath warm against my ear, limbs twitching with nervous energy, eyes raw with exhaustion. Concentration at work evaporated. My gaze would drift from the monitor, lost in replays. The glint of keys on the carpet, the cold spots in the hallway, the scuffing sound behind my chair. Paranoia became my shadow. Locks were checked with obsessive repetition. Evenings, the prospect of returning home, filled me with a low, simmering dread. One night, mid-brushstroke in the bathroom, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, foam clinging to my lips, a sharp, solid rap echoed against the door. Not a tentative tap, but a single authoritative knock. I froze, staring at the painted wood, chest seizing. The door wasn't locked. My hand shot out, twisted the knob, yanked it open violently, braced for... What? The hallway stretched before me, illuminated and utterly vacant. The living room lamp, visible from the doorway, gave another epileptic flicker. The smell of my own fear, sharp and coppery, filled my nostrils. Finishing brushing my teeth felt like a monumental act of will, my shaking hands spattering toothpaste across the porcelain sink. After that night, the keys were relegated to a drawer in my bedside table, hidden away. Perhaps severing visual contact would break the connection. It didn't. The lights still pulsed erratically. The phantom footsteps continued their nightly patrol. Once, standing in the living room, I felt it, an abrupt displacement of air, a fleeting, icy caress against my bare arm. I recoiled, phone nearly slipping from my grasp. No open window, no fan, no draft, just that. My skin crawled. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat audible in my ears. I fled the house again, gulping the cool night air on the porch like a drowning man surfacing. I attempted to broach the subject with a couple of friends, cloaking my fear in casual complaints about wiring and house settling. They offered practical advice, pest control, home inspections. I never mentioned the keys, their impossible journey, the way the strangeness had arrived bundled with their reappearance. The fear of ridicule, of being labeled unstable, kept the core truth locked inside. Yet deep down, a different conviction took root, something colder and more persistent than logic. Those keys, lost miles away, had found their way back. And they hadn't come alone. Last night, reading on my phone in bed, seeking exhaustion, the bedroom door was open just a crack, spilling a sliver of light from the perpetually burning hallway lamp. A sound began, soft, insidious, shuffling, slow, rhythmic, like stockinged feet dragging across the carpet pile, just outside the door. I strained to ignore it, focusing on the glowing screen, but my chest grew tight, my breathing shallow. Propping myself on an elbow, I listened intently. The shuffling seemed to hover right beyond the threshold. Carefully, slowly, I leaned forward, peering through the narrow opening. The illuminated stretch of hallway carpet lay empty, undisturbed. Yet the hairs on my arms lifted. A knot of tension gathered between my shoulder blades, the familiar pressure building in my chest. And then, abruptly, the hallway light blinked, plunging the corridor into absolute blackness for a heart-stopping instant before snapping back on. My heart slammed against my ribs. My jaw clenched so tightly my teeth ached. Sleep, when it finally came, was a turbulent sea. Fragmented dreams of walking these same halls, flipping switches that refused to hold, lights that died as soon as I turned away. I woke multiple times, drenched in sweat, t-shirt clinging damply to my back, staring into the oppressive darkness above my bed, a profound sense of dread settling deep in my gut. Whatever had hitched a ride with those keys, I thought with chilling certainty, had no intention of leaving. The idea of discarding the keys surfaces often, but a primal fear holds me back. The fear that severing that tangible link might provoke something worse. Logic still whispers reassurances. Perhaps someone found them, returned them silently. A bizarre prank coinciding with mundane house problems amplified by stress. But each flicker in my peripheral vision, each creak that deviates from the house's usual groans, each inexplicable cold spot brings me back to the shock of seeing those keys on the carpet, the moment the familiar became alien. I rearrange furniture, clean obsessively, anything to disrupt the suffocating tension. It persists, a palpable presence, especially after dark. So here I sit, back in the small office where it began, fingers flying across the keyboard, documenting the unraveling, clinging to the hope of a rational explanation. But every unexpected shadow, every stutter of a bulb, reminds me of the keys, their cold weight and the chilling conviction that when they returned, I ceased to be truly alone in my own home. Safety feels like a memory from a different life. The antique brass key turned, a resonant thunk echoing in the silence, and as the ponderous weight of the cypress door yielded inwards, I plunged unknowingly into a labyrinthine enigma that would not only commandeer my existence, but threaten its very continuation. Old dwellings, with their whispered histories and spectral memories embedded in plaster and beam, had always held me captive. Thus, when the advertisement for Umberstone House materialized, a neglected, sprawling Queen Anne edifice perched on the town's forgotten edge, derelict for generations, the pull was irresistible. Its price tag felt almost apologetic, and the estate agent radiated an unsettling eagerness, a haste that should have screamed caution. My own exhilaration, however, muffled the alarm bells. Umberstone House unfolded before me, a decaying majesty of soaring ceilings, exquisitely carved moldings, and a magnificent staircase spiraling towards the upper floors like a fossilized serpent. Neglect coated every surface, a thick shroud of dust and time. Yet beneath it shimmered the undeniable ghost of grandeur. That initial day dissolved in a haze of exploration, my mind sketching blueprints for resurrection. It was only upon ascending to the attic, a repository of forgotten lives under the angled eaves, that the house began to reveal its stranger inclinations. Amidst the predictable clutter, skeletal furniture draped in white, disintegrating boxes, something anomalous arrested my gaze. Tucked into a shadowed corner, half veiled by a spectral sheet, stood a door. Diminutive, perhaps 4 feet in height, it seemed an architectural afterthought, incongruous against the sloping attic wall. My hand reached for the knob. Locked. I mentally catalogued it, a query for the hasty agent. As I pivoted to depart, a flicker of aged metal beneath a battered steamer trunk snagged my attention. Shifting the heavy trunk revealed a small key, intricately wrought, its surface dulled by years of disuse. Impulse guided my hand. I inserted the tarnished key into the miniature door's lock. It yielded with a groan, a perfect, disquieting fit. Beyond lay a cramped obsidian space. My phone's flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating a sight that constricted my lungs. The walls were papered, layered deep with photographs, hundreds, possibly thousands, their edges curled, their surfaces yellowed like old parchment. They depicted people, solemn men, women frozen mid-gesture, children staring unnervingly forth. Yet a profound wrongness permeated the collection. The subjects' postures were unnaturally rigid, their eyes glassy, vacant. and woven into the fabric of every single image, a subtle, sinister watermark, unless deliberately sought, lingered a tenebrous figure. Drawing nearer, my light traced the contours of the photographs. The shadowy presence was a constant, sometimes a mere suggestion of a silhouette against a sunlit wall, other times disturbingly distinct, an elongated, spindly form possessing limbs of impossible length. In several frames it appeared to be extending towards the oblivious subjects, its fingers stretched into talons. Ice traced a path down my spine. Surely this was an elaborate fabrication, some former resident's macabre artistic endeavor. But then, scrutinizing the more recent-seeming prints, a chilling recognition dawned. The backdrops were familiar locales: the town square's fountain, the shadowed aisles of the municipal library, the very street stretching away from Umberstone House itself. Lost in this gallery of encroaching dread, I failed to register the soft click of the main attic door swinging shut behind me. The realization struck only when I turned to leave. I was entombed. Panic flared, hot and sharp, as my fists hammered against the unyielding wood. My calls for help were swallowed by the vast emptiness of the house. Time stretched into an elastic eternity before. Abruptly, the small door grated open. I stumbled back into the attic proper, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The space was unchanged, precisely as I'd left it. Yet the atmosphere had thickened, grown heavy with unseen observation. A profound sense of being watched propelled me downwards, a frantic descent fueled by the desperate attempt to rationalize, to dismiss the certainty blooming cold in my gut. I hadn't locked myself in. In the ensuing weeks, amidst the clamor of renovation, the house continued its subtle campaign of disquiet. Mornings would find furniture subtly rearranged, chairs angled towards unseen watchers, or doors I distinctly recalled securing now standing ajar, silent invitations. Fleeting movements danced at the periphery of my vision, dissolving into nothingness the moment I turned. But the photographs, they were the locus of the creeping horror. New images materialized within the hidden room, images I knew with chilling certainty were recent additions. They were photographs of me. Me, asleep in my bed, unaware. Me, sanding down a windowsill, absorbed. Me, walking the familiar path towards town. And always, lurking within the frame, the shadowy form, the lingering shade, drew inexorably closer. Unraveling the mystery became an obsession, consuming my waking hours and haunting my dreams. The local archive became my sanctuary, its dusty ledgers and brittle newspaper archives yielding fragments of Umberstone House's tenebrous past. The truth, when pieced together, was colder than the attic air. Decades punctuated by disappearances, dozens of former inhabitants vanishing without explanation. Official records spoke vaguely of relocation, of lives abruptly abandoned. But I perceived the pattern, the chilling correlation. Whispers in archaic folklore resonated with the figure in the photos, describing an entity known locally as the lingering shade, a stalker of souls, drawing sustenance from encroaching fear before claiming its quarry entirely. The narrative forming in my mind felt fractured, improbable. Voicing it aloud would surely invite diagnoses of delusion. Yet the evidence was irrefutable, imprinted on photographic paper and etched into the very fabric of the house. The lingering shade was not mere legend. It was present, palpable, and its focus was now squarely upon me. Escape became a recurring fantasy, quickly quashed. Attempts to flee, to sell, were invariably thwarted, my car succumbing to sudden, inexplicable failures. Violent, localized storms, rendering roads impassable. The house itself seemed complicit, a sentient prison reinforcing its spectral jailer. Then arrived the night that fractured my sanity's edge. I awoke abruptly, wrenched from sleep by the distinct, rhythmic click-whir of a camera shutter. An old film camera, unearthed from attic detritus that I'd intended to discard. In the moon-drenched dimness, I beheld it, suspended impossibly in mid-air, its lens rotating slowly, deliberately towards me. Behind it, coalescing from the shadows, stood the unmistakable silhouette from the photographs. A raw scream tore from my throat as I scrambled from the bed, bolting into the bathroom, slamming and locking the door. I remained huddled there until the first gray light of dawn bled through the window, body racked with tremors, tears tracing cold paths on my cheeks. When courage finally permitted emergence, a freshly developed photograph lay starkly upon my pillow. It captured my sleeping form, vulnerable, oblivious. The shade's hand, elongated and skeletal, hovered inches from my face, closer than ever before. Time I knew then was a luxury I no longer possessed. Confrontation was inevitable. My research had unearthed faint allusions to a counter-ritual, a perilous invocation whispered to possess the power to banish the lingering shade. Its efficacy was uncertain, its execution fraught with danger. But desperation left no alternative. The following week was a blur of preparation, gathering arcane components, inscribing symbols onto parchment, fortifying my unraveling resolve. Under the stark illumination of the full moon, I stood within the attic's heart, encircled by flickering candlelight and chalked sigils. The small door gaped open, the myriad eyes in the photographs seeming to gleam with cold, watchful malevolence. As the archaic syllables of the ritual tumbled from my lips, words in a tongue utterly foreign yet resonant with power, the house itself seemed to awaken. A phantom wind shrieked through unseen corridors, doors slammed violently, and whispers, sibilant and indistinct, bled from the very walls. The lingering shade materialized, assuming a terrifying solidity. Its face remained a featureless void, but its arms, those dreadfully elongated limbs, reached for me. Primal instinct screamed retreat, urged flight. Yet I held my ground, a solitary bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Failure meant condemning future souls to this same insidious predation, just as its chilling proximity threatened to extinguish my resolve, just as the cold emanating from its form seeped into my bones. A blinding incandescence erupted. The entity emitted a shriek, an unearthly dissonance that pierced my hearing, and then it vanished. Silence descended, profound and absolute. The oppressive weight that had permeated Umberstone House dissolved, replaced by a tranquility I hadn't known since crossing its threshold. Within the hidden room, the photographs, their dark magic undone, disintegrated into fine gray dust. To claim a return to normalcy, a seamless reintegration into the mundane, would be falsehood. Such passages through darkness irrevocably alter the traveler. I remain in Umberstone House. The thought of another soul inheriting its shadowed legacy unaware is unbearable. It has become, in its way, a refuge, a place attuned to echoes beyond explanation. Occasionally, in the deep hush of night, A fleeting shadow flickers at the edge of sight, but fear no longer holds dominion. I confronted the abyss and endured. The lingering shade imparted a harsh lesson. The world's tapestry is woven with threads far stranger and more perilous than we concede, yet concurrently revealed an intrinsic resilience, a strength unearthed only in extremity. Sometimes the courage to simply stand, to face the encroaching specters, is sufficient to compel their retreat. As for the camera, the catalyst of my terror, it rests upon the mantelpiece, not as a memento of fear, but as a testament. A reminder that horror can be captured, framed, and ultimately, through defiance and will, even the deepest shadows can be dragged into the revealing light. The first low chant uncoiled itself from the blackness, a serpentine vibration that tightened the air and sent ice down my vertebrae. Motionless within my sleeping bag, I listened, my own pulse a frantic drum against the stillness. There again, a deep-throated, rhythmic pulse, seemingly emanating from the very soil beneath us, yet also carried on the wind. This was no simple night beneath the pines. We had stumbled, blind and unsuspecting, into something woven from older, darker threads. Merely a weekend's respite. That was the plan. Leo, Chloe, and I, Elias, had envisioned this escape for months. Three souls weary of the city's relentless hum, yearning for the balm of untamed air and the vast canvas of a star-strewn sky. We were professionals nearing 30, craving disconnection. We'd selected a secluded enclave deep within the national forest, miles from any marked trail or crowded site. The trek in, arduous but fulfilling, delivered us to a small basin cradled by colossal evergreens. Our first day unfolded like a dream. Invigorating hikes, a plunge into the frigid clarity of an alpine lake, stories traded like currency around the crackling fire. But with the descent of the second night, the ordinary fractured. The chanting began sometime past midnight's deepest hour. Initially, I dismissed it as a phantom of sleep, but wakefulness brought the chilling certainty of its reality. It was a sound unlike any earthly music or language I knew, a primordial resonance that crawled beneath the skin. Unzipping my tent with painstaking slowness, I peered into the moon-washed clearing. Leo stood already outside, his face a stark mask in the argent glow. "You hear that, right?" His whisper was tight, eyes wide with disbelief. I could only nod, voice trapped in my throat. Chloe emerged moments later, hugging herself against a sudden, unseen chill. "What is that?" Her voice quivered. "It sounds everywhere." As if summoned, the chanting swelled, gaining texture. Multiple voices now, locked in unnerving unison. The syllables, if they were such, belonged to no tongue I recognized. They seemed to vibrate within my own chest, accelerating my heart, stealing my breath into shallow gasps. "We should see what it is," Leo proposed, ever the one to push boundaries. "Are you mad?" Chloe hissed, her fear palpable. "Rule one of horror movies. You don't walk towards the creepy chanting." Her logic resonated, yet a morbid curiosity wrestled with my instinct for self-preservation. What if someone needed help? Or perhaps it was some local tradition we'd unknowingly disturbed. "Look," I managed, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "Just a quick look. Anything feels wrong, we bolt back here, pack, and leave. Agreed?" A reluctant consensus was reached. Armed with flashlights and hiking poles clutched like inadequate talismans, we moved towards the sound's apparent epicenter. The night forest transformed into a labyrinth of shifting voids and grasping silhouettes. Every snapped twig was a gunshot to the nerves. The chanting intensified with each step, a siren call luring us deeper into the umbral woods. After perhaps 15 minutes of suffocating tension, a weak, flickering luminescence bled through the dense trees ahead. We doused our lights, advancing by the moon's spectral guidance. The scene unveiled in the clearing beyond is seared into my memory, a recurring nightmare rendered in firelight and shadow. Figures stood arranged in a circle, draped in dark, heavy robes, their faces lost within the cavernous depths of hoods. At the circle's heart lay a large, flat slab of stone, ancient and stained. Upon it rested a shape, terribly, unmistakably suggestive of a human form, though details swam in the unsteady glow. The chanting reached a frenzied, guttural crescendo, the sound seeming to claw at the very trees. One robed figure detached itself from the circle, lifting high an object that gleamed wickedly. A cold shock pierced me. A knife. "We have to go," I breathed, urgency clawing at my throat. "Now!" But before thought could translate to motion, the chanting ceased. Silence crashed down, absolute and terrifying. Then with a single synchronized movement, every hooded head turned towards our hiding place. "Run!" Leo roared, stealth abandoned in pure panic. We crashed back into the forest, branches lashing our faces, the ground uneven beneath our desperate flight. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit erupted. Heavy footfalls, inhuman cries that scraped the night air. My lungs burned, legs screamed, but raw terror propelled me. In the chaotic darkness, I lost sight of Leo, of Chloe. My world narrowed to the singular focus of escape. A treacherous root snagged my foot. I pitched forward, the impact driving the air from my lungs. Gasping, I struggled to rise, only for a hand to clamp around my ankle like iron. I kicked backward, a blind, desperate strike connecting with something yielding. A sharp grunt of pain, a momentary loosening of the grip. Enough. I scrambled free, plunging deeper into the wilderness, running until exhaustion finally felled me behind the broad trunk of a fallen giant. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I feared would betray my location. I lay there, scarcely daring to breathe, straining for any sound of pursuit. Minutes bled into what felt like an hour. Gradually, the familiar nocturnal symphony of the woods cautiously returned. An owl's lonely call, the furtive rustling of unseen creatures. But of Leo and Chloe, there was nothing. As the adrenaline ebbed, the stark horror of my predicament settled in. Alone, lost in the vast, indifferent wilderness. No supplies, no bearings, and somewhere in the encompassing darkness, those who practiced murder as ritual might still be searching. I waited, paralyzed by fear, until the first hesitant rays of dawn painted the eastern sky gray. Every dancing shadow was a potential threat, every noise a jolt to my frayed nerves. Staying put wasn't an option. I had to find help, had to report the unthinkable things I'd witnessed. It was well past midday when I stumbled, delirious and scratched, onto a marked hiking trail. An hour later, I encountered a group of day trippers whose initial cheerfulness evaporated at the sight of my ragged state and incoherent story. They summoned the park rangers. The search for Leo and Chloe spanned days. Our campsite was discovered untouched, save for bizarre symbols gouged into the bark of nearby trees. But my friends had vanished, without a trace. When the rangers located the clearing from my description, it was empty. No altar stone, no lingering scent of fire, nothing to substantiate my tale beyond trampled vegetation, and more of those unsettling glyphs carved into the trees. Hours blurred into days spent with law enforcement, the FBI. I recounted the night's events repeatedly, the disbelief barely veiled in their professional demeanor. Without corroboration, without bodies, without any tangible proof of the cultists, I became the anomaly. Perhaps traumatized into delusion, perhaps complicit. 5 years have passed. Leo and Chloe remain ghosts, officially listed as missing, likely victims of the wilderness's inherent dangers. A fall, an animal attack, convenient narratives. But I carry the truth, like a shard of ice in my soul. Sometimes in the dead quiet of night, I fancy I hear it again, that low, resonant chanting drifting on the breeze. I've relocated 3 times. The feeling of being watched persists, an invisible tether to that clearing. Fear is my constant companion, yet worse is the insidious doubt. Was it real? Or did terror birth a monstrous hallucination to shield me from a simpler, yet equally devastating random tragedy? I've immersed myself in the shadowed corners of knowledge. Obscure cults, forgotten rites, occult whispers, online forums, support groups for survivors of the inexplicable. They offer fragments, echoes. Slowly, a terrifying mosaic takes shape. What I saw, what claimed Leo and Chloe, transcended the merely human. The symbols, the cadence of the chant, the ritual's aura. They spoke of something ancient, dormant, slumbering in the deep woods, awaiting invitation. I no longer seek solace in nature. The wilderness is a locked door I dare not approach. Yet sometimes, gazing out at trees silhouetted against the night sky, their branches swaying, a chilling question surfaces. Are they only trees, or silent sentinels, watching, waiting, biding their time until the moment comes to draw me back into that consuming nightmare? One certainty remains. Our world holds depths we cannot fathom, and ignorance can be a fragile shield. Once that veil is torn, however briefly, there is no unseeing. The knowledge infects you, reshapes you, and you are left forever listening, forever wondering when they will return. So should you find yourself deep in the woods when darkness reigns, and a sound like chanting finds your ear, do not investigate. Do not play the hero. Flee, flee, and never look back. Because some sights, once glimpsed, imprint themselves upon the soul forever. And some rituals, once begun, echo endlessly. Perhaps it was amid the stuttering dance of the overhead bulb, its fitful buzz plunging the room into momentary twilight, that the profound silence of the house finally registered. I stood rooted in my grandfather Silas's study, the frayed edge of an ancient rug curling around my ankle, clutching the pocket watch he'd bequeathed me. Its metallic heft felt unnatural in my palm, a chilling weight, the chain spilling lifelessly between my fingers. 3 attempts I'd made to coax movement from its hands, yet they remained stubbornly fixed, an unyielding pair frozen at precisely 3, mocking my efforts. A difficult swallow drew the stale air deep into my lungs, air thick with the scent of decades undisturbed. The dark paneled walls seemed to lean inward, amplifying a quiet so dense it felt suffocating. I recalled arriving at this timber-groaning edifice, Silas's legacy. Always unsettling, this house, yet never had I anticipated this. Now the watch a cold talisman in my grasp, each breath felt labored, a struggle against unseen pressure. A prickling sensation crawled across my forearms, raising goose flesh despite my will. Turning the timepiece over, my fingers traced the esoteric geometry chased into its silvered casing. Interlocking circles, sharp triangles, baffling lines forming an arcane pattern. I depressed the small crown, anticipating the smooth release of the cover. It resisted, then yielded with a faint click. Within, the watch face gleamed, strangely polished, a miniature convex mirror set behind the static hands. My own distorted features stared back, twisting my stomach into a knot. Simultaneously, the ambient temperature plummeted. My exhalation ghosted white before me. Then a whisper, so faint, so elusive, it slid beneath the threshold of hearing like a razor's edge. My heart gave a frantic leap. A swift scan of the study revealed only the familiar. The hulking oak desk, sedimentary layers of yellowed documents, the brooding armchair draped in shadow. Nothing, no one. Just that disembodied murmur, a fractured syllable of something ancient and remote, clinging to the room's corners. I retreated into the corridor, hands scrabbling for the light switch. The hallway lamp responded with a pathetic flicker, throwing spastic shadows across the peeling damask wallpaper. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my eardrums. My free hand touched my brow, finding it slick with cold perspiration. A profound wrongness saturated the air, undeniable. But flight felt impossible. This was my inheritance, my refuge. Where else, at this hour? Snapping the watch shut felt like a small act of defiance, perhaps imagined. But the chill seemed to relent fractionally. Turning towards the living room, intending to collapse onto the sofa, marshal my thoughts, perhaps brew some calming tea, I faltered mid-step. My vision swam, a dizzying lurch, and abruptly I found myself standing before the blank obsidian screen of the television. How had I traversed the room in that lost instant? Blinking against the disorientation, I checked the mantel clock. 9:12 p.m. My phone screen glowed 4:14 p.m. Close enough. A ragged sigh escaped me. I pressed the watch between my palms, its hands still rigidly pointing to 3. Just a broken heirloom, I reasoned desperately. A mechanical failure. Yet the hairs on my nape bristled, instinct screaming otherwise. Sinking onto the sofa, I forced measured breaths. Inhale, exhale. My chest remained constricted. The silence deepened, stretched taut, until the faint, deliberate creak of floorboards overhead fractured it. I knew with chilling certainty the attic directly above was empty, a repository of forgotten relics and dust-shrouded boxes. Yet the footsteps persisted, soft, measured, purposeful. My breath hitched. I surged to my feet. The watch chain rattled against the coffee table as I set it down. Resolve hardening. I would ascend, confront the emptiness, banish this auditory phantom. The ascent was slow, my throat parchment dry, each stair tread groaning under my weight. At the corridor's end loomed the attic door. My hand, trembling, closed around the knob. The metal felt glacial. Pushing inward, I peered into the Stygian gloom, dust motes dancing in the feeble light spilling from the hallway. I located the pull chain for the bare bulb dangling from the rafters. It flickered violently before settling into a weak, steady glow, illuminating a landscape of stacked trunks, spectral furniture under white sheets, and Silas's archaic tools scattered in silent disarray. Empty, of course. I strained my ears. Only the frantic thrumming of my own heart answered. The air hung thick with the scent of mildew and aged varnish. Turning to descend, my gaze snagged on something partially concealed behind a wooden crate. A small leather-bound journal. Retrieving it, I recognized the symbol embossed on its cover, the same intricate cipher adorning the watch casing. I riffled through the pages, filled with Silas's precise, spidery script. Fragments leaped out. Stolen time, cyclical trap, ensnared in 3, the chronometer demands. A band tightened around my chest. I snapped the journal shut. The overhead bulb sputtered violently. Vertigo washed over me, the attic tilting precariously. The light flared, an agonizing nova, then plunged into darkness before reviving. I stumbled, catching myself against a dusty trunk. When I regained my equilibrium and pulled open the attic door, the hallway below seemed dimmer, steeped in deeper shadow. My phone now read 10:25 p.m. An hour bled away in what felt like mere moments. Downstairs, the watch awaited me on the coffee table, precisely where I'd left it. Yet something had altered. A peculiar numbness pervaded my arms, a pins and needles sensation. Rolling up my sleeves revealed faint markings etched upon my skin. Shallow geometric lines mirroring the watch's arcane design. They caused no pain, shed no blood. They were simply there. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my insides. Frantic rubbing did nothing to dispel them. I fled to the bathroom, slapping the light switch. The bulb buzzed, then held. My reflection was a pale, haunted mask. Cold water splashed on my face did little to ground me. It was then I noticed the pattern on my right forearm had elaborated. A delicate wheel-like sigil near my elbow that hadn't existed seconds prior. Touching it yielded no sensation, only the unnerving presence of the mark. A whisper, thin and sibilant, curled from the hallway. I bolted out, leaving damp footprints on the worn linoleum. The watch, when I neared it again, seemed denser, heavier, as if feeding on my fear. An attempt to call for help proved futile. My phone's battery, inexplicably drained, refused to connect the call. Beyond the windows, the wind rose to a mournful howl, rattling the panes. Yet the curtains admitted no external light, only an impenetrable moonless void. The next hour, or what perceived itself as an hour, was spent pacing, desperately seeking rationality. I put water on for tea only to find the kettle stone cold moments later. Time slipped through my grasp like water. One instant, I lit a candle in the kitchen. The next, I stood bewildered in the hallway. The candle burned halfway down, hot wax dripping onto my unfeeling hand. Always, the watch remained locked at 3. Always the urge to open it warred with a profound dread of confronting that mirrored face again. Answers, however, were imperative. Perhaps closer scrutiny held the key. Returning to the study, I seated myself at Silas's desk, the leather-bound journal beside me. With trembling resolve, I forced the watch open once more. The tiny hinge groaned in protest. Inside, my reflection leered back, distorted, pallid, eyes wide with primal terror. But behind my own image, almost subliminal, flickered another visage, gaunt, angular, its eyes like vacant clock sockets. A strangled gasp escaped me as I slammed the cover shut. The desk lamp above flickered erratically, then extinguished. Darkness crashed down, and in its suffocating embrace the whispers intensified, coiling directly into my ears, insidious tendrils weaving through my thoughts. The temperature plunged further, my breath hitched in ragged bursts. Fumbling blindly, I sought the lamp's pull chain, praying for illumination. When light reluctantly returned, the watch was somehow back in my hand, my fingers locked around it. The spectral tracery on my arms had spread, faint lines now reaching across my shoulders, creeping towards my collarbone. A scream built in my throat, but I swallowed it down, choking on rising panic. Action was essential. This cursed artifact had to be expelled. Stumbling through the corridor, nearly upsetting a porcelain vase, I lurched towards the front door. My intent was absolute. Fling the watch into the night, bury it deep in the garden soil, cast it into the street, any act to sever its parasitic bond. But as my hand closed on the latch, it jammed solid. I pulled, twisted, rattled it violently, shouting wordless frustrations into the unresponsive hallway. The whispers seemed to chuckle, a dry, sibilant mockery swirling around me. My ears rang. The door remained immovable. Heart pounding against my ribs, I turned to the nearest window, heaving at the sash. Sealed tight. The house had become a hermetic prison. Cursing, I paced the living room, the overhead light flickering like a dying pulse. Each flicker seemed to steal a sliver of time. Each beat of my heart felt sluggish, as if the watch itself were warping the very fabric of seconds. Destruction. What if I simply obliterated it? Rummaging in a kitchen drawer yielded Silas's old claw hammer. Hands shaking uncontrollably, I placed the watch upon the dining table's scarred surface and raised the heavy tool. As the hammerhead began its descent, the lights abruptly died, plunging the world into absolute blackness. In that instant of sensory deprivation, something colder than ice clamped around my wrist. I froze, paralyzed. When the lights stuttered back to life moments later, my hand was empty. The watch had vanished from the table. The hammer lay discarded on the floorboards, and my arms, from wrist to shoulder, were now entirely canvassed in the intricate, terrifyingly beautiful ciphers. My breathing grew shallow, each inhalation a painful effort. There was no escaping it. I had to confront this presence. Staggering back to the study, I found the journal lying open, though I had no memory of leaving it so. A single phrase, stark against the aged paper, snagged my attention. To escape its cycle, face the reflection, and deny its claim. Gripping the watch, which had reappeared on the desk blotter, I forced it open a final time. My gaze locked onto the miniature, distorting mirror. I saw my own face, ravaged by fear, and behind it, faint yet undeniable, the hollow-eyed shade, a silhouette trapped within the silvered glass. Jaw clenched, Hot tears blurring my vision, I managed a whisper. "You can't have my time." My voice fractured, but I drew breath and repeated, louder, firmer, "You cannot have my time." A violent jolt, like a powerful static discharge, surged through me, radiating from the watch. The lights flickered with manic intensity. Nausea, overwhelming and sudden, threatened to buckle my knees. Then, as abruptly as it began, the chaos ceased. The lamp overhead emitted a calm, steady glow. The air lost its icy bite, warming perceptibly. I stood panting, sweat plastering my shirt to my back. The watch in my hand still read 3, yet I sensed a subtle internal shift, a lessening of pressure. The patterns incised on my skin began to recede, losing their sharp definition, fading slightly. Carefully, I placed the watch back on the desk, my breath still ragged. My legs felt like jelly as I navigated the hallway. Reaching for the front door latch, I turned it. This time it yielded smoothly. A blast of cold, clean night air rushed in. A welcome shock. I stumbled onto the porch, gulping down the freshness like a drowning man. Yet a deep disquiet lingered. Before retreating further, compelled by some morbid curiosity, I glanced back through the study window. The watch lay on the desk, its face dimly catching the porch light, reflecting my silhouette standing at the threshold. And for a terrifying heartbeat, I could have sworn I saw it again, the spectral counterpart hovering just behind my reflection, a thin, knowing smile curving its lips, as if patiently waiting. My skin felt tight, drawn. My heart still hammered an erratic beat. The patterns hadn't vanished entirely. Faint, ghostly lines remained, a permanent vestige etched into my flesh. I couldn't force myself back inside. The watch remained, eternally arrested at 3. It had granted a reprieve, perhaps, but that final, chilling reflection promised it was merely biding its time. Closing the heavy oak door behind me, a residual coldness crawled beneath my skin, a haunting reminder that whatever entity resided within Silas's ancient timepiece had no intention of letting me truly escape. "6 months have elapsed since I disembarked at this frigid research station, anticipating protracted days of glacial quietude and meticulous labor. This assignment, sought for its promise of solitude, was meant as sanctuary from the clamor of populated offices. My duties were uncomplicated, charting meteorological systems, chronicling temperature flux, gauging anemometric readings, observing for anomalous atmospheric phenomena. Boredom, perhaps a pang of loneliness, these were the adversaries I expected. Then, commencing the 3rd week, a series of perplexing cloud architectures began to manifest. Shapes possessed of an unnerving Euclidean precision, too deliberate for random coalescence. Not the familiar amorphous cotton of typical formations, but constructions of exact arcs, sharp angles, as if drafted by an unseen geometer. The inaugural sighting I dismissed as optical fatigue. The second compelled me to capture images, desperate for objective validation. Yet the photograph stubbornly refused to render the intricate detail my eyes perceived. A maddening discrepancy. I, Alara Vance, was the solitary meteorologist to hear. The station itself, a Spartan structure, a primary laboratory, compact living quarters, a storeroom brimming with provisions. Beyond its walls lay a small fenced enclosure safeguarding the instruments from errant wildlife. No soul resided nearby to corroborate my unsettling observations. Only the weekly radio check-in with headquarters punctuated the isolation. Their queries were invariably perfunctory. Temperature logs, wind vectors, barometric pressures. Data. Once I ventured a description of the celestial anomalies, only to be met with counsel to remain vigilant and maintain recordings. Boredom, they likely surmised, or imaginative flights. Thereafter, I held my tongue regarding the skies. My routine involved morning and evening excursions to document cloud cover, humidity, atmospheric pressure. One dawn, I witnessed a celestial sextet. 6 distinct, immaculate semicircles, evenly spaced across the firmament like architectural renderings. They held their impossible forms for 20 minutes, then dissipated into unremarkable vapor. I stood frozen in the biting air, perspiration tracing a cold path down my spine. The breeze felt unnaturally still for such an orchestrated display. My heart thrummed against my ribs. An urge to cry out surfaced, futile in the encompassing emptiness. Following this, the specter of delusion loomed large. I scrutinized satellite imagery, but the feeds depicted only standard nebulous clusters meandering as weather patterns ought. This stark schism between ocular witness and digital record fostered a profound disquiet. I'd find myself staring at the monitor, rubbing temples raw, questioning the very fabric of my perception. A tightness would constrict my throat whenever the thought surfaced. Days bled into weeks. The aerial geometries escalated in complexity. Sometimes triangles marshaled in regimented rows. Other times, concentric rings materialized like ripples frozen mid-air. Once, forms resembling characters flickered into being, though belonging to no alphabet I recognized. The angles, the lines, they defied natural explanation. My logbook became a repository of these aberrations, filled with my best attempts at replication. Reviewing the sketches later sent shivers down my arms. The proportions felt too exact, too intentional. This was no mere condensation adrift on the wind. Subtle transformations began within me. Standing sentinel beneath the sky, a prickling current would course along my forearms. My mouth would turn arid, swallowing becoming a conscious effort. My stomach clenched, coiled in anticipation of some unnamed event. A persistent feeling of being observed made me glance perpetually over my shoulder, only to find the desolate landscape unchanged. The wind sometimes carried a susurrus, like whispers just beyond auditory grasp. A low subsonic drone occasionally permeated the silence, untraceable to any equipment, seemingly emanating from the vault of the sky itself. Sleep became a treacherous territory. I thrashed fitfully through the nights, my mind replaying the impossible shapes. Often I'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat, convinced a voice had murmured just outside my window. Venturing out revealed only the void of night, star-dusted and silent. No shapes, no arcs. Yet I'd remain there, immobilized by a pounding heart, torn between retreating to bed and maintaining a futile vigil. I clung to structure, brewed strong coffee at dawn, checked the instruments, logged the data, performed a brief perimeter walk. Forced calisthenics, maintained bodily function. Regular meal times were observed. But the cloud formations persisted, relentless intrusions upon my sanity. A persistent tremor took root in my hands, as if from excessive caffeine. Concentration fractured. Every passing wisp overhead triggered a spike of trepidation. Would it coalesce into another impossible design? One afternoon, the sky became a canvas for a slow, hypnotic vortex spiraling across the zenith. I watched, transfixed. For what felt like an hour, my feet seemingly bolted to the permafrost. A suffocating pressure built within my chest, as though I'd forgotten how to exhale. When the spiral finally disintegrated, I realized my hands were insensate with cold, my lips cracked raw by the relentless wind. Stumbling back inside, equilibrium precarious, I splashed frigid water on my face. My reflection startled me. Eyes bloodshot, exhausted, the muscles in my neck twitching involuntarily. That night, sleep remained elusive. Rising near 2 a.m., drawn to the window, I swore I perceived faint lights maneuvering behind the cloud layers, ephemeral glimmers tracing a straight line, like silent, equidistant bulbs. Pushing the door open for an unobscured view, the instant I crossed the threshold, they vanished. The sky resumed its normalcy, yet the air felt charged, thick with static electricity. The fine hairs on my arms bristled. My throat felt scraped raw, and the quiet drone returned, ambiguous. The wind or the echo within my own skull? The following morning, battling insomnia's residue with potent coffee, I went to gather temperature readings. Standing near the instrumentation mast, a subtle vibration resonated through the soles of my boots. So faint, I initially attributed it to leg fatigue, but then it recurred, a delicate tremor, as if something stirred deep underground. I forced myself to disregard it. Seismic data showed nothing significant. Imagination, I insisted, or perhaps the station settling on its foundations. Later that day, the clouds formed a perfect lattice. Immaculate squares tessellated across the heavens, perhaps 10 abreast. My notepad slipped from my grasp. My heart hammered, breath hitched, shallow and rapid. Disbelief warred with the undeniable visual evidence. I stared, willing them to dissolve, to stretch into benign, familiar shapes. But they held their structure with unwavering rigidity for a full 5 minutes. Crouching, rubbing my eyes fiercely, I looked again, unchanged. Then, as abruptly as they had materialized, they fractured into thin, dissipating streaks. A wave of biliousness washed over me. I collapsed onto the station steps, pulse frantic, hands trembling so violently I could scarcely retrieve my pen. The conviction solidified. These patterns were not random atmospheric phenomena, but transmissions. From whom or what remained terrifyingly ambiguous. I attempted more methodical documentation. Time, temperature, wind direction correlated with each sighting. But the data remained stubbornly mundane. Barometric pressure held steady. Wind velocities stayed within typical parameters. No precipitation accompanied these displays. It defied all meteorological logic. I contacted headquarters again, my voice strained, detailing the weeks of recurring patterns. The individual on the line offered assurances that my concerns would be relayed to a senior meteorologist, but no follow-up ever materialized. My request for an aerial survey via plane or drone was dismissed as non-priority. The isolation deepened. Absolute and profound. One evening, I resolved to observe the entire sunset outdoors. The sky bled from azure to ochre, then deepened into violet. As twilight draped the landscape, a colossal annulus of vapor began to form directly overhead, rotating slowly, majestically like a celestial wheel. It appeared substantial, yet portended no storm. The rotation was fluid, silent, inexorable. Tilting my head back, neck aching, I stared, anticipating lightning or thunder. None came. The ring maintained its silent revolution for at least 15 minutes. The pressure in my chest intensified. My knees felt watery. My own respiration sounded unnervingly loud in the stillness, my mouth filled with a bitter taste. Then it too faded, melting back into the guise of ordinary clouds as darkness consumed the sky. That night, the humming seemed amplified, a persistent thrum against my eardrums. I paced the laboratory's confines like a caged creature, eyes darting constantly towards the window, half expecting an intrusion. My heart raced. Perspiration beaded on my forehead despite the ambient chill. Every gust of wind rattling the structure made me flinch. I typed a frantic report, chronicling the week's sightings, my fingers shaking on the keyboard. My throat felt constricted, swallowing difficult around a perceived lump. Around midnight, an irresistible compulsion drew me outside again, an urge to check the clouds, as if summoned. The air hung thick, cold, making my teeth chatter. Looking skyward for a fleeting moment, a new configuration emerged. Parallel diagonal lines, phosphorescent in the lunar glow. They flickered, held, then dispersed. My heart slammed against my ribs. My chest seized, forcing me to gasp for air through my mouth. I pressed back against the station wall, fearing collapse. My head swam. Cold sweat slicked my face. Thereafter, even the station's interior felt compromised. Sitting before the computer, I'd perceive soft susurrus of static, like a distant radio tuned between stations. Turn-in revealed nothing. Sometimes an inexplicable pressure built around my ears, akin to rapid altitude gain, though the elevation remained constant. My eyes felt perpetually strained. Headaches pulsed rhythmically at my temples. I'd massage my forehead, seeking relief. One afternoon, entering the storage area for an extra blanket, the overhead lights flickered erratically. As my vision adjusted to the dimness, I swore I glimpsed an alien shape huddled in the far corner. A trick of shadow, surely. Yet my heart leaped, and I fled the room, breath catching in my throat, hands trembling uncontrollably for a full minute afterward. Eventually, denial became untenable. Something was attempting contact. Each pattern radiated intention. Each appearance was heralded by that peculiar electrical buzz in the air, accompanied by the faint, pervasive drone. I could decipher no message, but the repetition, the precision. It felt like a signal, targeted directly at me. Was it some undiscovered natural process or something entirely outside the known parameters of atmospheric science? I needed incontrovertible proof. Extra cameras were deployed, including a high-resolution lens affixed to the roof. An entire weekend was devoted to capturing time-lapse footage, staying awake through sheer will. Reviewing the recordings yielded nothing beyond the mundane drift of clouds. Frustration mounted, curdling into a knot in my stomach. Heat flushed my face. The disparity between real-time observation and recorded evidence was a chasm widening within my grasp of reality. My own eyes saw vivid geometry. The lens captured only faint suggestions, indistinct blurs. My routine calls to headquarters devolved into desperate pleas. I implored them, my voice frayed, to take my reports seriously, but received only vague assurances of future investigation. Sleep became a scarce commodity. Appetite dwindled. My shoulders remained perpetually knotted, a constant tautness gripping my neck. Hours were spent simply standing by the window, waiting, convinced the next formation held the key, if only I remained vigilant enough. One night, the wind rose to a howl, rattling the perimeter fence. The station groaned under the assault. My door shuddered in its frame. Maintaining composure required immense effort. I moved through the small building, double-checking latches, securing equipment. Peering through the main door's viewport, I saw clouds churning in a pattern unprecedented. The lattice reappeared, but now a spinning disk materialized at its heart, rotating slowly within the grid. My skin tingled intensely. My legs felt leaden, unresponsive. The drone returned, louder now, a palpable vibration that seemed to course through the very air, through the structure, through my bones. I gripped the doorframe, respiration rapid and shallow, heart hammering against my sternum. My mouth felt packed with cotton. Looking away was impossible. The formation held, longer than any previous display, 5, perhaps 10 minutes. My body felt subject to some unseen, inexorable pull. Then with startling abruptness, it all dissolved. The wind subsided. The clouds fragmented into random, innocuous shapes. The humming faded, leaving only a ringing silence in my ears. I took a shaky step back, slammed the door shut, and engaged the lock. Leaning against the cold metal, I fought to regulate my breathing, mind reeling, fixated on the impossible, precise geometry I had just witnessed. After that night, resignation settled in. Ignoring this was no longer an option. My professional standing was likely forfeit if I persisted without tangible evidence, yet silence felt like a deeper betrayal. I composed a long, detailed email to headquarters, chronicling every event, every sensation, every inexplicable pattern. Hitting send felt like casting a message in a bottle into a vast, indifferent ocean. I shut down the laptop. The tightness in my chest was suffocating. I needed air. Stepping outside near 2 a.m., the world was utterly still. The sky vast and empty save for a few mundane clouds drifting lazily. The silence felt heavier now, charged with implication. I scanned the perimeter, half expecting to find eyes watching from the darkness. But there was only the frigid air and the faint sigh of the wind. I resolved to see the assignment through. 2 months remained. Departure without official cause was unthinkable. No immediate physical danger presented itself. No official reports corroborated anything sinister. So I adhere to the routine. Log the patterns I witness, check the instruments, strive for a semblance of normalcy. But each time my gaze lifts skyward, my skin crawls. My entire body tenses reflexively. Breathing becomes a conscious act. It is as if I perceive another layer of reality superimposed upon this one. A layer resistant to capture, defiant of explanation by conventional science. Yet it persists, repeating its deliberate geometries. Now I wait. Each day unfolds under a pall of uncertainty, wondering what the sky will reveal next. A resident malaise occupies my chest. My shoulders ache perpetually from the duress. Does anyone anywhere credit my account? I scan the heavens each morning, braced for the impossible. Each night the soft drone returns, a subtle reminder that something is reaching out. Its intent remains opaque. Whether I will ever comprehend it seems increasingly doubtful. But I remain alone, watching the clouds, feeling every nerve ending ignite when they begin once more to weave their precise and terrifying shapes. And with each occurrence, I feel myself drawn deeper into an unnerving space beyond the charted territory of meteorology, perhaps beyond the known boundaries of the real. Night's deep velvet tore open with the report of a rifle, a jagged sound that ripped me from the shallow pool of sleep. A disoriented moment, dream static perhaps, before the echo bled away, supplanted by the harsh scrape of men's shouts and the violent snap of undergrowth. The chilling truth bloomed. This sanctuary, sought for solace, had just become a crucible. My name is Alara. Never in crafting this escape to a borrowed cabin far from the city's grind did I imagine myself quarry. It was meant to be sanctuary, a week carved out for quietude, for untangling the knots within. Work had worn me thin, connections frayed. The deep woods promised clarity, a reset. An acquaintance's offer, her family's cabin, nestled miles from any road, felt like deliverance. The initial days were pure balm. Trails explored under dappled sunlight, novels devoured by the hearth's flickering glow. The profound luxury of disconnection. No signal bars, no digital hum. Just the breathing forest and me. Until the fourth night detonated. The shot had originated eastward. Half a mile, maybe less. Close enough for the sound to slap the air, distant enough for a fragile hope that the disturbance might skirt my solitude. Barefoot on the frigid planks, I crept to the window, heart a frantic drum against my ribs. A swollen moon painted the woods in unsettling silver and stark shadow. Trees stood like skeletal sentinels. Then a flicker, peripheral, frantic, a silhouette weaving through the timber, vectoring straight towards the cabin. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Retreating from the glass, my mind scrambled for logic. A hunter, perhaps, though the season felt wrong. A lost soul firing for rescue. No, a deeper instinct screamed danger. Jeans pulled on over trembling legs, a thick sweater, boots laced with fumbling fingers. What now? The cabin offered no lifeline. No phone wire snaked through these trees, my mobile a useless brick. Isolation, once a comfort, now felt like a trap. The shouting intensified, coalescing into distinct, enraged voices. That way! She went this way! Another voice, sharper. Don't lose her! Any lingering illusion that this wasn't my concern dissolved like mist. They were hunting, and their prey was near, terribly near. Seconds stretched, taut as wire. Hunker down, pray they pass, or bolt into the treacherous dark, risking entanglement in their lethal game. The choice vanished as frantic fists hammered the cabin door. Please! Oh God, help me! A woman's voice, ragged, thin with terror. A heartbeat's pause, then instinct propelled me forward. I wrenched the door inward. She stumbled across the threshold, a whirlwind of desperation, gulping air. Young, early 20s maybe, with eyes wide as startled prey, dark hair wild with leaves and twigs. A crimson stain bloomed on her shirt. "They're comin'," she choked out. "Hide me, please." I slammed the door, the bolt rasping home, my thoughts a chaotic storm. Who? Why? No time. Outside, the crashing pursuit grew louder, closer. "The cellar!" I hissed, gesturing toward a trapdoor nearly hidden in the kitchen floorboards. "Now!" We'd barely pulled the heavy door shut above us when the cabin entrance exploded inward with a sound like splintering bone. Heavy boots thudded overhead. Footsteps stalked the small space. "Check everywhere," commanded a low, gravelly voice. "Can't have gone far." In the cellar's absolute dark, we huddled, breath held captive in our chests. I felt the tremors running through the young woman beside me. Above, the scrape and drag of furniture, the sounds of violation, of a frantic search. "Clear, boss," one reported after an eternity. "Maybe she kept running." "Impossible," the leader retorted, the sound dangerously close. "Dogs would have her scent. She's near. I feel it." My own heart seized as footsteps paused directly over the trapdoor. Silence stretched, agonizing, thin. Then blessedly, they moved away. "Set a perimeter," the voice instructed. "She won't stay hidden. Dawn breaks, we find her." The intruders filed out, their voices receding into the night. A ragged sigh escaped me, one I hadn't known I was holding. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice fragile. "I'm Lena." "Ilara?" I returned, the name feeling alien on my tongue. "What in God's name is happening? Who are they?" Lena was silent for a long moment, the weight of her fear palpable in the darkness. "Poachers," she finally said, voice low and strained. "Not just amateurs. This is organized, ruthless. They target endangered animals for the black market. I'm a wildlife biologist. I was tracking wolves. I saw too much." The reality struck with physical force. Not mere trespassers, but dangerous professionals, armed and motivated to silence any witness. "We have to get out," I whispered, urgency tightening my throat. "They'll be back with the light." Lena nodded, a small defeated movement in the dark. "How? They're watching the cabin. They mentioned dogs." My mind raced, dredging up details from the maps I'd studied. "There's a river, west of here, maybe 2 miles. If we reach it, the water might mask our scent, confuse the dogs. Downstream, maybe help." A desperate gamble, but the only one we had. From the cellar's dusty corners, we salvaged meager supplies, tins of food, a sputtering flashlight, a box of damp matches. Tucked away in a forgotten crate, I found an old hunting knife, scant defense against firearms, yet better than bare hands. We waited, coiled in the suffocating dark, until the moon dipped below the tree line, plunging the forest into profound blackness. Then, like shadows ourselves, We eased open the trap door and slipped into the chilled night air. The woods thrummed with unseen life. An owl's call, the skittering of tiny paws in the leaf litter. Every twig that snapped underfoot sent jolts of adrenaline through us, freezing us mid-step, hearts hammering. Slowly, painstakingly, we navigated westward. Perhaps halfway to the river, the sound drifted through the trees, the distant, mournful baying of hounds. They knew we'd fled. "Run!" I hissed, grabbing Lena's arm. We crashed through the undergrowth, branches lashing like whips. The howling grew louder, closer, a primal sound that scraped along the nerves. Just as my lungs burned to the point of collapse, the blessed murmur of moving water reached us. The river materialized ahead, a dark, flowing ribbon between the trees. Without pausing, we plunged in. The shock of the glacial water stole my breath, but survival instinct drove me forward. We surrendered to the current, kicking frantically to stay afloat, carried downstream. Behind us, angry shouts erupted from the riverbank as our pursuers arrived too late. How long we drifted, propelled by water and terror, I cannot say. An age, it felt like. Finally numb with cold and exhaustion, we clawed our way onto the far bank. As the first hint of dawn bruised the eastern sky, we stumbled upon a marked hiking trail. 2 more hours of leaden-footed progress brought us, staggering, to a ranger station. The ranger's expression, seeing us emerge from the wilderness, soaked, mud-caked, scratched, and haunted, was a mask of stunned disbelief. The authorities listened, their faces grim. A major operation unfolded in the ensuing weeks. The poaching syndicate was dismantled, its members apprehended. Lena's testimony, bolstered by our harrowing experience, proved instrumental. Justice, it seemed, prevailed. Yet months have passed, and still sleep offers little refuge. Sometimes the phantom howling of dogs echoes in my dreams, and I wake slick with sweat. I live in the city now, cocooned in concrete and noise, seeking distance from the wild's deep shadows. Lena and I remain connected, sisters forged in that night's terrifying fire. Safety is a fragile concept, I've learned. The immediate threat is caged, yes, but the memory lingers, a cold certainty that darkness persists. Out there in the quiet, hidden places of the world, other predators stalk, and not all of them hunt on 4 legs. So I recount this tale, a stark reminder. The most dangerous beasts often walk upright, and even moments of profound peace can shatter, forcing an ordinary soul into a desperate fight to simply endure. Vigilance then is not paranoia, but necessity. For you never truly know when the path to solitude might twist into a race for survival.